Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Nature channel. Tonight, we're going somewhere truly magical, deep into the warm, misty edges of Southeast Asia, where ancient mangrove trees grow with their roots curled into the water like sleeping fingers. And when the sun finally sets and the sky turns to velvet, something unbelievable happens. Tiny lights begin to blink, first one, then 10, then thousands, all flashing together perfectly like stars that fell into the trees and decided to stay. These are fireflies, and tonight we're going to follow them. Take a slow breath in. Let your shoulders soften. You don't need to go anywhere or do anything. Just rest here and let the warm night air of the mangroves carry you gently towards sleep. Close your eyes for just a moment and imagine the smell of warm saltwater mixed with mud and green leaves. That is the beginning of a mangrove forest, a place where the land cannot quite decide if it belongs to the sea or the earth, and so it simply becomes both. The roots of the mangrove trees arch upward out of the water like curved bridges, patient and ancient, holding the soft ground in place the way a hand holds a sleeping child. The water beneath them is still and dark, and it moves slowly, barely breathing, following the quiet pull of distant tides. This is the edge of the world in a way, not a sharp edge like a cliff or a border, more like the soft hem of a blanket, where one thing fades gently into another. The sea fades into land, the day fades into night, and the noise of the world fades here into something close to pure silence. In Southeast Asia, in places like Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines, these mangrove forests stretch for miles along river deltas and coastlines, and they are some of the oldest living landscapes on Earth. A single mangrove forest can be hundreds of years old, and yet every night it does something remarkable. Every night, as the last of the orange light disappears from the sky, the trees begin to glow. It starts with one light, a single small pulse, soft and gold, somewhere deep in the upper branches of a nipa palm or a mangrove apple tree. Then another, then another, and slowly, very slowly, like the forest itself is learning a new song, the blinking begins to find a rhythm. The lights begin to match each other. One blink, a pause. One blink, a pause. And then, in what feels like a kind of miracle, thousands of tiny lights are all flashing at exactly the same moment, over and over, turning the entire tree into something that looks like a giant lantern hung by the river. These are fireflies, and what they are doing, this perfectly synchronized, breathtaking light show, is one of the most mysterious and beautiful behaviors in all of nature. The firefly is not a fly at all, despite what its name suggests. It is a beetle, a small, soft-bodied beetle, usually no longer than your little fingernail. Most species have dark brown or black wing covers, with patches of red or orange near the head, and a small lantern-like organ on their lower belly that is the source of all that gentle magic. During the day, they look quite plain, resting on leaves, hidden among the shadows. But when night falls, they become something else entirely. The light that a firefly makes is called bioluminescence, a word that simply means living light. It comes from a chemical reaction inside the firefly's body, where a substance called luciferin combines with oxygen to produce a soft glow. And the remarkable thing about this light is that it produces almost no heat at all. Scientists call it cold light, and it is one of the most efficient light sources in all of nature. A firefly wastes almost no energy making its glow. Nearly all of the chemical energy becomes light. A candle, by comparison, wastes most of its energy as heat. But the fireflies in the mangroves of Southeast Asia do something even more extraordinary than simply glowing. The males, the ones you see lighting up the trees, are not blinking randomly. They are synchronizing. They are learning over the course of each evening to flash at exactly the same time as every other male in the tree. One blink per second, or sometimes twice per second, depending on the species. All together, all as one. This is called synchronous flashing, and for a long time, scientists who heard about it from travelers did not believe it was real. When Western naturalists first returned from Southeast Asia in the 19th century with stories of trees that blinked in perfect unison, they were sometimes laughed at. It seemed too strange, too beautiful, too deliberate to be possible. And yet, it is entirely real. And tonight, in the mangroves, it is happening right now. The females watch from lower in the trees or from nearby vegetation, and they respond to the males with their own small flash, a single soft pulse, given at just the right moment after the male's flash, to signal that they are interested. The male who sees a response will fly toward it, and in this way, in darkness and silence, the fireflies find each other. Let your breathing slow down now. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You are very safe and very comfortable. Imagine you are lying in a small wooden boat, drifting slowly along the edge of a mangrove river, and all around you, the trees are beginning to light up for the night. The water is warm and dark beneath you. The air smells of earth and salt and something faintly floral. The mangrove blossoms, which are small and white, and fall into the water like tiny stars. The boat barely moves. There is no current tonight, just a gentle rise and fall, the river breathing, and the trees are beginning to glow. The tree that the fireflies love most in the mangroves of Thailand and Malaysia is called the Sonneratia tree, sometimes called the mangrove apple, because it produces round, green fruits that look a little like apples and float when they fall into the water. It grows tall and straight, with arching roots at its base, and it has smooth, pale bark that catches the moonlight gently. The Sonneratia trees along the Selangor River in Malaysia are so famous for their firefly colonies that people travel from all over the world to drift past them in small wooden boats after dark. A single Sonneratia tree can host thousands of fireflies, all of them males, all of them flashing in perfect unison. They tend to return to the same tree night after night, and some trees have been used by the same firefly colony for generations. Imagine a tree that has been glowing every single night for decades. Every night, as long as the forest is healthy, the light returns. The species most responsible for this synchronized magic in Southeast Asia is called Pteroptyx tenor, a small, delicate firefly with a particularly rapid flash. It can blink up to 3 times every 2 seconds, giving it that clean, bright, rhythmic pulse that makes the trees look electric. When hundreds of thousands of them synchronize on a single tree, the effect is extraordinary. The tree pulses like a heartbeat, steady and soft, over and over, all through the night. How do they synchronize? This is one of the questions that scientists have spent many years trying to answer, and the answer turns out to be both simple and deeply beautiful. Each firefly begins the evening flashing at its own pace, its own internal rhythm. But each firefly is also watching the lights of the others, and each time it sees another flash, it adjusts its own timing very slightly, either speeding up or slowing down by a tiny fraction of a second. Over the course of about 30 minutes, these small adjustments add up, and without any leader, without any signal from above, the entire colony falls into perfect synchrony. This is called emergent behavior, a pattern that arises from many individuals, each following very simple local rules without anyone being in charge. It is the same kind of thing that happens when a flock of starlings moves in those beautiful flowing shapes through the sky. Thousands of birds, each responding to the birds immediately around them, and somehow creating something that looks like it was choreographed by a single intelligence. The fireflies, like the starlings, are smarter together than they are alone. You might find yourself breathing a little slower now. Your body knows how to rest. It is very good at it when you give it the chance. Let the muscles of your face soften. Let your jaw be loose. Imagine the night air coming in gently through an open window or through a gap in the mangrove leaves, carrying with it the smell of the river and the distant, quiet sound of water finding its way around roots. The mangrove forest is never completely silent. There is always something: the drip of water from a leaf, the tiny splash of a small fish near the surface, the occasional creak of a branch. But these sounds are soft and slow, and they blend together into something that feels less like noise and more like texture, the texture of a quiet, living night. And through it all, the trees keep blinking. 1, 2, 1, 2. A slow, golden pulse like the heartbeat of the forest itself. Not all fireflies glow as adults. This might surprise you, but in many species the adults do not glow at all, or only very faintly. The glowing, for them, happens mostly when they are young in a stage of life called the larval stage. Firefly larvae are small, segmented creatures that live on the ground, under logs, or in moist leaf litter. And they glow too, faintly, with a steady greenish light that gives them another name: glowworms. But the larvae of the mangrove fireflies are even more unusual than this. They do not live on the ground or in leaf litter. They live underwater. The larvae of Pteroptyx, tinner, and related species in Southeast Asian mangroves spend their early lives submerged in the brackish, muddy water at the base of the mangrove trees. They are small and pale and slug-like, and they hunt in the darkness beneath the water surface. And what do they hunt? Snails. Freshwater and brackish water snails move slowly along the roots and mud of the mangrove floor, feeding on algae and plant debris. The firefly larva finds them by touch and by scent, moving with surprising speed for something so small. When it reaches a snail, it does something clever. It injects the snail with a chemical that both paralyzes it and begins to dissolve its soft body from the inside. The larva then drinks the resulting liquid, a hunting technique that sounds quite dramatic when described like this, but which takes place in utter silence, in the dark water, with a gentleness that belongs entirely to the night. This liquid feeding method is called extraoral digestion, digesting food outside of the body before consuming it. And it is shared by other insects as well, including some beetles and the larvae of certain flies. It is a very efficient way to eat, especially for a creature with a small mouth. The larvae glow too, even underwater. Scientists are not entirely sure why. It may be a warning to predators, a signal that says, "I taste bad, do not eat me." Many glowing creatures in the natural world use their bioluminescence in exactly this way. The light says, "I am here, I am confident, and I am not worth the trouble." It is one of nature's most elegant forms of self-defense. Not hiding, not running, but simply glowing, calm and steady in the dark. If you feel like leaving a comment below about your favorite part of this story so far, please do. It always means a lot. And if you are enjoying this quiet journey through the mangroves, a like on the video helps this channel reach more sleepy people who might need a little peace tonight. Take a breath. Let it go. You are doing wonderfully. There is nowhere to be and nothing to carry tonight. Just the soft glow of the mangroves and the quiet, dark water and the distant stars. The mangrove forests of Southeast Asia are not only home to fireflies, they are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth. A phrase that sounds scientific, but simply means they are full of life, enormously, quietly, constantly full of life. Every root, every surface, every handful of muddy water is occupied by something living, feeding, resting, growing. The roots of the mangrove trees are covered in tiny oysters and barnacles, their shells rough and cream-colored, filtering the water endlessly as it passes. Small crabs, blue, orange, red, no bigger than your thumb, move sideways through the tangle of roots, each one carrying its armored body with a kind of dignified efficiency. Mudskippers, which are fish that can breathe air and walk on their fins, rest on exposed roots in the evening, blinking their large raised eyes at the darkening sky, looking like small creatures from another time entirely. And above all of this, above the crabs and the oysters and the mudskippers, the fireflies come out. The synchronized flashing of the mangrove fireflies is species-specific, which means that the exact pattern of flashes is unique to each species. Pteroptyx tenor flashes twice per second. Another species, Pteroptyx malaki, flashes at a different rate. Females only respond to the flashes of their own species, ignoring the lights of other fireflies entirely. In this way, even in a forest that holds many different firefly species, each kind of firefly lives in its own private frequency of light, invisible to all but its own kind. This specificity is important. In a world full of signals and noise, the firefly has found a way to speak only to the one listener it needs to reach. There is something quietly beautiful about this. The idea that every signal has its intended recipient, and that the right flash at the right moment, in the right rhythm, will always find the right light waiting for it somewhere in the dark. The mangrove trees themselves are extraordinary living things. They are the only trees in the world that grow in saltwater, and they do this not despite the salt, but through a series of elegant adaptations that seem almost deliberate in their cleverness. Some species filter salt out of the water as it enters through their roots, removing up to 90% of it before it reaches the rest of the tree. Others allow salt into the tree's tissues, but then push it into older leaves, which then fall off, carrying the salt away with them. Still others excrete salt directly through tiny pores in their leaves, leaving tiny white crystals on the leaf surface. If you touch a mangrove leaf, you can sometimes feel a faint, gritty roughness, which is the salt that the tree has worked so hard to remove. Let yourself feel the weight of your body tonight, the softness of whatever you're lying on, the warmth of it beneath you. You do not need to hold yourself up. You can let go completely. The earth is very patient and very good at holding things. Imagine the mangrove roots beneath the water, all those curved arches, patient and firm, holding the earth together, holding the water back, holding the whole soft world in place, while the fireflies blink above in the dark. There is a river in Malaysia called the Selangor River, and along its banks there are several small villages where the people have lived alongside the firefly trees for many generations. In the local language, the fireflies are sometimes called kelep-kelep, a word that sounds like what it describes, a soft, repeated blinking sound, if light could make a sound. Kelep, kelep, kelep. For many years, the people of these villages watched the firefly trees as a matter of course, the way you might notice the moon rising or the tide coming in. The trees blinked. The nights passed. The fireflies returned. It was simply part of what the night was. Then, in the 1980s, researchers from universities in Malaysia and Japan began coming to the river with notebooks and cameras, and they started to understand more precisely what was happening in the trees. The synchronization they found was not random or approximate. It was mathematically precise, as exact as a clock. The fireflies were not roughly synchronized. They were synchronized to within a fraction of a second, every single blink for hours at a time. One of the things that makes this synchronization so remarkable is that there is no conductor. No single firefly is in charge of setting the rhythm. Not the biggest one, not the brightest one, not the one that has been in the tree the longest. They all simply adjust to each other, each one responding to the lights of its neighbors, and somehow, through nothing more than this mutual patient adjustment, they become one. Scientists who study complex systems sometimes call this kind of thing self-organization, and they find it in many places beyond firefly forests, in the way brain cells coordinate to produce thought, in the way water molecules arrange themselves into the hexagonal crystals of a snowflake, in the way city traffic organizes itself into flowing waves even without anyone directing it. The universe, it seems, has a tendency to organize itself, to find patterns, to synchronize, to settle into rhythms, whenever the conditions are right. The mangrove firefly colonies along the Selangor River are now protected, and local communities run nighttime boat tours that allow visitors to drift past the glowing trees in silence. The rule on these tours is no flash photography, no loud noise, no bright lights. Only the river, the dark, and the trees. Visitors are asked simply to watch, to be still, and to receive what the forest is offering. If you have not yet had a chance to explore our playlist of nature sleep stories, it is waiting for you whenever you need it. A whole quiet library of forests and rivers and starlit skies. There is something there for every kind of night. Let your eyelids feel heavy now if they want to. You do not have to keep them open. The story will carry you either way, asleep or drowsy. It makes no difference. Either is exactly right. The light of a firefly is not white, like an electric bulb, or yellow, like a candle. Depending on the species, it can be green, yellow-green, orange, or a soft, warm gold. The most common color among Southeast Asian mangrove fireflies is a cool, clean yellow-green, precise and bright. And when thousands of them flash together, the color fills the whole air around the tree with a faint, diffuse luminescence, as if the tree itself is exhaling light. The color is determined by the specific molecular structure of the luciferin in that species, as well as by the pH and temperature inside the firefly's light organ. Small changes in these conditions can shift the color slightly. Some fireflies that produce yellow-green light in warm conditions will shift toward a more pure green when it is cooler. The firefly is, in a sense, a living thermometer, writing the temperature of the night in color. Bioluminescence is far more common in the ocean than on land. More than 75% of deep-sea creatures produce some form of light. Anglerfish, jellyfish, plankton, certain squid, and in the deep ocean, where sunlight never reaches, bioluminescence is the only light there is. It is the language of the deep, flashes and glows and pulses that mean, come here, or stay away, or I am here, or I am hungry, or simply, perhaps, I am alive. On land, bioluminescence is rarer and more precious. Fireflies are the most familiar example, but there are also glowing fungi, mushrooms that produce a faint, steady, greenish light from their caps and gills, turning the forest floor into something from a dream. There are glowing earthworms in certain parts of the world. There are glowing millipedes in California that use their bioluminescence as a warning to predators. And there are the glowworms of New Zealand and Australia, not firefly larvae, but the larvae of a different creature entirely, a fungus gnat, that hang from cave ceilings in clusters, trailing silk threads, and light up the cave with a soft blue-white glow that looks impossibly like a night sky full of stars. But there is something about the firefly that feels especially close and especially warm. Perhaps because it moves. Perhaps because its light flickers rather than glows steadily. Perhaps because it lives in the same kind of air we breathe, under the same trees, near the same rivers. It is a creature of the surface world, not the deep or the underground, and its light is a light that keeps company with ours. Your breathing is slow and even now, in and out, in and out, like the tide moving through the mangrove roots, very gently, without hurry. There is a word in Japanese, hotaru, that means firefly, and it carries with it hundreds of years of poetry and feeling. In Japanese literature and art, the firefly has been a symbol of the soul, of summer evenings, of love that is brief and bright and beautiful. There are haiku about fireflies, short, 3-line poems that try to hold a moment of light the way a cupped hand holds water, knowing it will soon be gone. In Chinese culture, fireflies have been associated with scholars and hard work. There is an old story about a boy who was too poor to afford lamp oil for reading, and so he caught fireflies and read by their light. The story may be legend, but the image is real. A child sitting in the summer dark with a jar full of tiny lights, his book open across his knees, the night warm and full of sound. There is a tenderness in that image that is hard to name. In Thailand, where the mangrove firefly colonies are particularly famous along the Gulf Coast and in provinces like Samut Songkhram and Amphawa, the firefly season brings families and couples out onto the rivers in small boats after dark. The boats are quiet. The engines, if there are any, are turned low, and the passengers sit without speaking, drifting past the glowing trees, watching the synchronized light. There is an understanding among those who make this journey that words are not necessary here. The trees speak in a language older than words. The mangroves of Amphawa are not far from Bangkok, perhaps 90 minutes by road, and yet they feel like an entirely different world. The night there is darker and softer than the city night. The sounds are different. Frogs instead of traffic, the rustle of palm fronds instead of voices, the occasional splash of a fish instead of a siren, and always, from late April through October, the firefly season brings those patient, rhythmic lights to the trees along the canal. The firefly season follows the rains. In Southeast Asia, the monsoon brings moisture that encourages the growth of the plants and algae that the snails eat. And more snails mean more food for firefly larvae, and more larvae mean more adult fireflies the following season. The fireflies are connected to the rain, and the rain is connected to the ocean, and the ocean is connected to everything. It is all one slow, breathing system, turning and turning like a wheel. When a male firefly searches for a mate, he does not simply blink and wait. He flies. He moves through the air in a characteristic pattern, different for each species, while flashing, tracing arcs and loops through the dark air above the trees. Some species fly in shallow, U-shaped dips. Others move in tight spirals. Others fly more or less horizontally, blinking as they go. The pattern is part of the signal, part of what the female is watching for, along with the rate and color of the flash. In the mangrove colonies, where thousands of males are all flashing synchronously, the flight paths create an extraordinary visual effect. The air above the trees becomes a kind of slow firework, tiny lights moving in curved paths, winking on and off, crossing and recrossing each other in the dark. If you were to photograph it with a long exposure, you would see arcs of light traced in the night, overlapping and looping, soft as brush strokes. The females are mostly stationary while they watch. They perch on leaves and stems, angling their bodies toward the tree full of flashing males, and they wait. When a male's flash catches their eye, when it comes at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right rhythm, in exactly the right color, they flash back, a single brief pulse, an answer. The male, seeing the response, changes course. He moves toward the light, flashing as he goes. She flashes again. He adjusts. She adjusts. And in this way, two small creatures find each other in the enormous dark, guided by nothing more than light and patience. This back and forth exchange of signals is called a dialogue, and it is remarkably precise. Each species has a specific time gap between the male's flash and the female's response. The female does not respond immediately, but waits for an exact delay, and the male is attuned only to responses that come at the right moment. A response that comes too soon or too late is ignored. This prevents different species from accidentally mating with each other, and it means that every successful encounter is a kind of perfect timing. Two rhythms finding each other in the dark and deciding wordlessly that they match. There is something about the idea of two beings finding each other across the dark through patience and the quiet persistence of a signal. Something that feels true in a way that goes beyond fireflies. But that thought is for another night. Tonight, let it simply be a small, beautiful fact about beetles and light and the banks of a warm river. If you are finding this peaceful, feel free to like the video. It is a small thing that helps very much. And now, let your body go a little heavier, a little softer, into whatever is holding you. The mangrove ecosystem does something remarkable for the rest of the world, quite quietly, without any acknowledgement. The roots of the mangrove trees, those arching, tangled underwater structures, trap and hold sediment carried down by rivers from inland, preventing it from spreading into the ocean and choking coral reefs. The trees also absorb enormous quantities of carbon dioxide from the air, storing it in their roots and the deep, anoxic mud around them. Mangrove forests store more carbon per acre than almost any other type of forest on Earth, sometimes 3 to 5 times as much as a tropical rainforest. The mud beneath a mangrove forest is dark and dense, almost black, and it smells of ancient things, of sulfur and salt and decomposing leaves and time. This mud is extraordinarily rich in organic material, built up over centuries from fallen leaves and dead roots and the remains of countless small creatures. It is, in its way, one of the most fertile substances on Earth, and it is entirely the creation of the trees and the creatures that live among them. In this mud, the firefly larvae hunt. They move through the dark, soft earth and through the shallow water above it, following the trails of snails, finding their meals in the dark through a combination of touch and chemistry. A larva might spend 6 months to a year in this larval stage before it pupates, wrapping itself in a small chamber of earth and emerging, transformed, as the flashing adult you see lighting up the trees. The transformation from larva to adult, from a mud-dwelling underwater snail hunter to a flying light maker, is complete and total. Almost nothing about the adult resembles the larva except the bioluminescence, which persists across both forms like a family trait. The adult firefly does not eat at all in most species. It lives only to find a mate, to pass on its genes, and then to rest. It may live for only a few weeks as an adult, but during those weeks, it lights up the night so completely that the trees along the river become beacons visible from a boat a kilometer away. The brevity of the adult firefly's life gives its light a particular quality, or perhaps that is only how it seems to us, who are aware of time. The firefly is not aware of its brevity. It does not know it is brief. It simply flashes and moves and finds and rests. It is entirely present. It is entirely here. Let yourself be entirely here too. Right now, in this moment. There is nothing else needed. Just the sound of the story and the soft weight of your own resting body, and somewhere in the distance, imagined or real, the slow, golden pulse of the firefly trees. Rain falls on the mangroves differently than it falls anywhere else. When it falls on a forest, the leaves and branches break it into smaller drops, and it arrives at the ground softened and scattered. In a mangrove, the rain falls through layers of broad, waxy leaves and lands in the water below with a patter and hiss that is one of the most soothing sounds in the natural world. 1,000 tiny splashes all at once, each one small and harmless, together making a sound like static, like white noise, like the inside of a seashell. In Southeast Asia, the monsoon rains can fall for hours, warm, heavy, unhurried. The rivers rise slightly, the mud softens, the air smells of wet earth and leaves. The fireflies shelter during the rain, retreating deep into the foliage, their light dimmed or extinguished for the duration of the downpour. And then, when the rain stops, the air clears to a particular kind of freshness, charged and clean, and the trees begin to dry, and the fireflies begin to emerge again, and the night fills once more with their quiet, rhythmic light. The mangrove trees flower, and their flowers are visited by moths and small bees that have adapted to the brackish environment. The flowers are often white or cream-colored, and many of them open only at night, releasing their fragrance into the dark air to attract the right pollinators. One such tree, the Sonneratia, has flowers that open in the evening and are visited almost exclusively by fruit bats, large, soft-winged creatures that arrive at dusk and hover briefly at each flower, drinking nectar and picking up pollen on their fur. The bats move through the firefly trees, their wing beats nearly silent, threading between the blinking lights. Imagine, for a moment, a fruit bat navigating through a tree full of fireflies. The air around it lit up in pulses, its wings catching the brief flashes and throwing them off in other directions, its large, dark eyes reflecting the glow. The bat is not aware of the beauty of this scene, but we are. And perhaps that is enough, that somewhere in the world this is happening, regardless of whether anyone is watching, and that we can imagine it here together in the quiet. Remember, our playlist is a good companion for restless nights. If you ever find yourself awake when you would rather be sleeping, it is there, waiting with rivers and forests and open skies. There are some firefly species in which the female also flies and flashes, not just the male. In these species, the roles are more equal, and the dialogues in the air are more complex, with both partners moving and signaling at the same time. But in the synchronizing mangrove species of Southeast Asia, it is the males who do the flying and the flashing, and the females who watch and respond from their still perches. This is not a hierarchy, just a division of roles that has evolved over millions of years to work. The female's stillness serves a purpose. By remaining stationary, she gives the male a fixed point to fly toward. Her single answering flash is easier to locate than a moving light would be. Her patience is, in its way, a form of power. The firefly family, Lampyridae, is an ancient one. The earliest fossilized fireflies are around 100 million years old, from the Cretaceous period, when dinosaurs still walked the earth. These ancient fireflies may have already been bioluminescent. The chemistry of firefly light is so complex and specialized that it likely evolved only once, suggesting that all living fireflies share a single ancestor who, at some point deep in the past, developed the ability to make light. What triggered that original development of bioluminescence in the firefly's ancestors is not entirely clear. Some scientists believe the first firefly light was not a mating signal at all, but a warning, the same function as the glowing larvae, signaling toxicity to potential predators. Over time, the chemistry of warning became repurposed as the chemistry of courtship, and the light that once said, "Leave me alone," began to say, "Come find me." This kind of evolutionary repurposing, a feature that evolves for one reason and then gets used for another, is extremely common in nature. Feathers, which now allow birds to fly, originally evolved for warmth. The bones of the human ear were once the jawbones of a fish. Nature is deeply practical, and it is very good at taking something it already has and finding a new use for it. The chemistry of firefly bioluminescence has also found new uses in human science. The lucifer and luciferase reaction from fireflies, the same chemical process that makes the trees glow along the Selangor River, is now used in laboratories around the world as a kind of living light switch. When scientists want to know if a certain gene is active in a cell, they can attach the firefly's luciferase gene to it, and the cell will glow if the gene turns on. It is one of the most elegant tools in modern biology, and it came from a small beetle blinking in a tropical tree. Let that sit softly for a moment. The light of the mangroves, carried into the laboratory, used to illuminate the inner workings of living cells. The firefly, without knowing it, has given us a way to see inside the dark. The firefly has enemies, like all living things. Spiders web their silks between branches where fireflies fly, and sometimes a firefly is caught and wrapped and consumed, its cold light briefly visible through the spider's silk before going dark. Frogs sit on branches near the firefly trees, their mouths open, patient as the night itself, waiting for a firefly to come within reach. Certain birds, particularly nightjars and other nocturnal species, hunt fireflies in the air, snapping them from their flight paths with soft, wide beaks. And there is one more enemy, both more interesting and more alarming than the others. Certain female fireflies of the genus Photurus, a North American group not found in the mangroves but worth knowing, are predators in disguise. They have learned to mimic the flash responses of females of other firefly species, luring in males who think they have found a mate. When the male arrives, the Photurus female eats him. These fireflies are sometimes called femmes fatales, a phrase borrowed from old detective stories, and the name, while dramatic, captures something true. They are not malicious. They are simply hungry, doing what evolution has shaped them to do. And there is something remarkable about the intelligence required. The Photurus female must learn the flash patterns of multiple other species and switch between them as needed. She has a repertoire, and she uses it. But the mangrove firefly trees, here in the warm dark of Southeast Asia, hold no such drama. The synchronized males flash their patient, rhythmic light. The females watch and respond. The bats weave among the branches. The river moves beneath, and the night holds it all, gently, without preference. Somewhere in the water below the trees, a small firefly larva is moving slowly through the mud. It is soft and pale, and it glows just faintly, a barely visible ghost light, there and not there. It does not know about the light show above it, or the history of its species, or the scientists who have spent years studying its chemistry. It simply moves forward, following the slow pull of hunger in the warm, dark, patient water. There is something peaceful in that simplicity. Just moving forward, just following the next thing, without plans, without worry, without anything but the present moment and what it asks of you. Your eyes may be closed now. That is perfectly fine. The story is still here. Let it move through you like water through roots, slowly, gently, finding its way. The mangrove forest is connected to the open ocean by the tides, and twice a day, or once a day, depending on the location, the water level changes. During high tide, the water rises among the roots, submerging the lower portions of the trunks, lapping at the barnacles and oysters, lifting small fish up into spaces they could not reach before. During low tide, the roots are exposed, and the mud flats around the trees are revealed, dark and still, with small ripple marks left by the retreating water and the tracks of crabs pressed into the soft surface. The fireflies time their emergence to the tide. They begin to appear in the trees as the tide turns in the evening, and they are most active during the several hours around low tide, when the air above the river is still and clear. High tide stirs the air with the smell of the open sea, and sometimes brings a slight breeze that makes it harder for the fireflies to synchronize. A moment's disruption can cause the colony to lose its rhythm, and it may take several minutes for the synchrony to reestablish itself. When synchrony breaks down in a firefly tree, you can watch it reform. The lights become scattered and individual, each firefly blinking at its own pace, creating a confused shimmer rather than the clean pulse of synchrony. And then, slowly, groups of 2 or 3 begin to match each other. These small synchronized groups grow and merge. Like ripples converging on a pond, the rhythm spreads outward through the tree until the whole colony is once again pulsing as one. It takes, on average, about 15 minutes for a disrupted colony to fully resynchronize. 15 minutes of patient adjustment, of each firefly watching its neighbors and shifting its own rhythm slightly, until the clock of the whole colony is set. There are firefly species on every continent except Antarctica. More than 2,000 species in all, living in habitats as different as the cool forests of the eastern United States, the dry savannas of Africa, the high-altitude meadows of the Himalayas, and the warm coastal mangroves of Southeast Asia. Each one has its own flash pattern, its own habitat, its own way of moving through the summer dark. Together, they light up the night on every inhabited continent, every warm season, quietly, without fanfare, part of the world's furniture, as reliable as rain. And if you lie somewhere warm tonight and look out a window, or imagine yourself looking out a window toward a dark field or a garden or a riverbank, somewhere with leaves and air and living things, you might find yourself imagining the light, not quite there, but not quite absent, just at the edge of seeing. The word bioluminescence comes from the Greek bios, meaning life, and the Latin lumen, meaning light. Life, light. It is one of those compound words that is larger than its parts, because the thing it names is more than just chemistry, more than just light. It is the world making itself visible in the dark. It is life insisting on being seen. The firefly's light organ, the lantern, is located on the underside of the abdomen, and it is one of the most finely engineered structures in the insect world. It consists of 2 layers, an outer layer of transparent cells that act as a window, letting the light out, and an inner layer of light-producing cells called photocytes, packed with mitochondria and luciferin and luciferase. Behind the photocytes is a layer of reflective cells, white and crystalline, that bounce the light forward and outward, doubling its brightness. The firefly controls its flash by controlling the supply of oxygen to the photocytes. For many years, scientists were unsure how the firefly could flash on and off so quickly. The oxygen supply, they thought, could not be switched fast enough by normal muscle action. The answer, discovered only relatively recently, involves nitric oxide, a gas that the firefly releases in tiny bursts directly into its tracheal system. Nitric oxide temporarily blocks the mitochondria in the photocytes from using oxygen. And when the nitric oxide disperses, oxygen floods in and the light reaction begins. The firefly is, in effect, playing the organ, controlling the flow of gases through microscopic tubes to produce precise, timed bursts of light. The whole system is so elegant, so compact, so perfectly tuned that engineers and material scientists have studied it for ideas about how to build more efficient light sources. A firefly lantern the size of a thumbnail outperforms any human-made light source of the same size in terms of the ratio of light produced to energy consumed. Nature, as always, solved the problem first. It is getting late now in the mangroves. The tide has begun to turn again, and the air is very still. The trees along the river are at their brightest, a long, steady pulse of gold running down the bank, reflected in the dark water below, so that it looks as if there are two forests, one above and one beneath, both of them glowing. The bats have gone. The frogs have settled. Even the crabs have moved deeper into their root tangles for the night. Only the fireflies remain, patient, synchronized, eternal in the way that small creatures can be eternal, each individual brief, but the whole colony enduring season after season, tide after tide. If there is a moment tonight when you feel like dropping a comment about what you imagined or what you felt during this story, please do. Those small messages are read and they matter. And if you know someone who needs a quiet night, this video and our playlist are worth sharing. Let your breath be slow. Let it be easy. The night is at its deepest now, the hour when the sky is darkest, the middle hours long past midnight, long before dawn, and the mangrove forest holds a particular quality of stillness in this time, not the stillness of absence, but the stillness of fullness. Everything alive is present. Everything is resting. Even the river seems to have slowed to something barely moving, a dark mirror between the glowing banks. The firefly trees are still lit. They will continue to flash through much of the night, tapering toward morning, growing slower as the air cools and the males tire, until by the time the first gray light begins to appear in the east, the trees are quiet again, and the fireflies have retreated to their leaves to sleep through the heat of the day. Tomorrow night, they will come out again, and the night after that, and after that. As long as the forest stands, as long as the river runs, as long as the air is warm, and there are leaves to rest on, and snails in the mud, and the tides still move, the fireflies will come out, and they will find each other, and the trees will glow. There is something in the reliability of this that is deeply comforting. The world keeps making light. The seasons keep turning. The rain keeps falling on the broad, waxy leaves and dripping down to the dark water. The crabs keep moving sideways through the roots. The mudskippers keep watching the sky with their large, patient eyes. The fruit bats keep threading through the blinking air, their wings silent, their furs soft with the dust of 100 flowers. You are part of this world. Your body is made of the same substances as the mangrove mud: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, all rearranged into the particular form of you, warm and breathing and here. When you breathe out, the air you release is breathed in by the leaves of trees and returned to you changed. You are in a conversation with the living world at every moment, even when you are still, even when you are sleeping, especially when you are sleeping, perhaps. Sleep is the body's way of returning to the quiet, of turning inward the way the tide turns, without urgency, without drama, simply retreating to a place of rest and renewal, and then, later, gently, coming back. Here are 12 more parts continuing the story, picking up seamlessly where part 15 left off. The river does not stop when you sleep. This is one of the quiet miracles of the natural world, that everything continues, patient and unhurried, whether or not there is anyone watching. The mangrove forest goes on breathing through the night, its leaves exchanging gases with the dark air, its roots drawing water upward through the slow capillary action of 1,000 tiny vessels. The tide turns again, and the water rises a few centimeters among the roots, and the barnacles open their tiny feathered legs and begin to feed. The fireflies keep blinking. The mud keeps holding its secrets. There is a kind of comfort in knowing that the world does not depend on your attention to keep going. You can let go. You can close your eyes. The river will still be there when you wake, still moving, still dark, still full of the small, busy life of its banks and its bed. The mangrove apple tree, the Sonneratia, produces its fruit slowly over the course of several weeks. The fruit begins as a small green bud tucked between broad leaves and swells gradually into a round, flat-bottomed sphere about the size of a tennis ball. The skin is tough and green, and the flesh inside is white and slightly acidic. When the fruit is ripe, it falls, not slowly the way a leaf falls, drifting and turning, but with a clean, decisive drop into the water below. It floats, and the river carries it away. This is how the Sonneratia spreads, not by wind, not by animals eating the fruit and moving on, but by water. The fruit can float for weeks, traveling along rivers and out into coastal currents until it reaches a muddy bank where conditions are right. There, it comes to rest. And after a time, a small root descends from it into the mud, and a small shoot rises upward toward the light, and a new mangrove tree begins. Every tree along the Firefly River was once a floating fruit. Every tree was once a traveler carried by the water to exactly the right place. There is something in that, the way the world carries things where they need to go, without the thing itself needing to know where it is going. The fireflies above the Sonneratia trees are blinking in their slow, golden rhythm. The fruit hangs heavy in the branches. The roots arch downward into the dark water, and the river moves beneath it all, carrying everything gently forward, fruit and leaf and reflected light, toward the open sea, which holds everything eventually in its patient, enormous arms. Let your thoughts move like the river tonight, not stopping on anything, not catching on anything, just moving slowly past the way water moves past a root. Whatever is in your mind right now, you can let it float downstream. You do not need to hold it. You do not need to solve it. Not tonight. Tonight it can simply drift, and the river will carry it, and you can rest. Your hands can be soft now. Your feet can be heavy. Your shoulders can fall all the way down. The bed, the floor, whatever holds you, is very firm and very patient, and it will hold you for as long as you need. Among the animals that share the mangrove forest with the fireflies, perhaps none is more fascinating or more ancient-looking than the mudskipper. A mudskipper is a fish that has, over millions of years, developed the ability to live out of the water for hours at a time. It breathes through its skin, which it keeps moist by rolling in the mud, and through a chamber behind its gills that holds a small reservoir of air. It can climb roots and branches using its strong pectoral fins like crutches, pushing itself along with surprising speed. The mudskipper's eyes are extraordinary. They sit on top of its head, raised on small muscular stalks, and they can move independently. One eye looking forward, the other looking back. The mudskipper can also retract its eyes into moist sockets when it needs to keep them from drying out. And when it does, it blinks in what looks unmistakably like a slow, deliberate wink. There is something comical and endearing about the mudskipper. It looks a little like a creature that has not yet decided whether to be a fish or a lizard, and has settled contentedly for being both. During the day, male mudskippers defend territories on the exposed mudflats, performing elaborate displays for females, bobbing their heads, raising their large dorsal fins, which are brightly colored with spots of red, orange, and blue. They dig burrows in the mud where the female lays her eggs, and the male aerates the burrow, pumping air into it with his mouth to keep the eggs supplied with oxygen. He tends the eggs carefully until they hatch, and then the tiny larval fish drop into the water and begin their own lives. At night, the mudskippers rest. They are not nocturnal creatures. That territory belongs to the bats and the nightjars, and of course, the fireflies. The mudskippers find shallow crevices between roots or retreat partway into their burrows, and they become very still. Their eyes, which are constantly moving during the day, grow quiet. Their bodies settle into the mud. In the mangrove night, each kind of creature has its own time. The day shift and the night shift hand off the world between them with a smoothness that requires no negotiation. The sun goes down, and the mudskippers rest, and the fireflies rise. The sun comes up, and the fireflies dim, and the mudskippers emerge to stand on the mud and watch the morning with their large, winking eyes. This division of the day, this sharing of time and space, means that the mangrove forest is never wasted. Every hour is used by something. Every part of the tree, from the topmost leaf to the deepest root, is occupied by something that belongs there. The ecosystem is dense with life, layered with life, and yet it never seems crowded because each creature knows its place and its time and keeps to it with the quiet precision of long practice. Feel the density of the world around you, not as weight, but as warmth. All those living things, all going about their patient business, breathing and moving and resting and finding. You are part of that density. Your breathing adds to the air. Your warmth adds to the warmth. You belong to the world the way the mudskipper belongs to the mud, completely, comfortably, without question. There is a small bird called the mangrove blue flycatcher that lives almost exclusively in mangrove forests. It is a modest-sized bird, about the length of your hand, with vivid blue upper parts and a warm orange chest. Colors so clean and precise that seeing one feels like finding a jewel dropped in the mud. It sits on low branches near the water's edge, watching for insects with its large, dark eyes, and then drops suddenly from its perch in a swift, clean dive to catch something from the air or the surface of the water. The mangrove blue flycatcher is territorial and quiet. It has a soft, somewhat melancholy song that it sings mostly at dawn and dusk, a few clear notes that rise and fall in the morning air. It is not a loud bird, not a showy bird. It simply goes about its life in its small patch of mangrove, catching insects, singing its brief song, raising its young in a small, cup-shaped nest wedged into a fork of roots above the water. Birds in mangrove forests tend to be small and specific. Species that have become so precisely adapted to this particular environment that they are found almost nowhere else. The mangrove warbler, the mangrove robin, the mangrove heron, each one shaped over thousands of generations to fit the exact contours of this world: the saltwater, the arching roots, the dense canopy, the tide. The mangrove heron is perhaps the most patient of these birds. It stands on an exposed root at the water's edge, completely motionless for minutes at a time, waiting for a fish or a small crab to come within reach of its long, sharp beak. Its patience is absolute. It does not fidget. It does not look away. It simply waits, with a stillness that suggests it has all the time in the world, because, in the way that matters, it does. There is a practice sometimes called bird stillness in contemplative traditions. The idea of becoming as motionless as a hunting heron, letting the world come to you rather than reaching for it. The body relaxed, but the attention clear, not forcing anything, just waiting and watching and being present to whatever arrives. You do not need to practice that tonight. Tonight, you can simply be still and let sleep come to you the way the fish comes to the heron, not chased, not sought, but simply arriving in its own time when the conditions are right. The mangrove blue flycatcher has tucked itself into its nest for the night. The heron stands in the dark, motionless. The fireflies blink their patient gold above the river, and the night deepens very slowly, the way a tide deepens, not all at once, but inch by inch, minute by minute, until you find yourself at the bottom of a very soft and very peaceful sea. The firefly's chemical light has a twin in the plant world. Not bioluminescence exactly, but something adjacent. The fluorescence of certain flowers. Some flowers, particularly those that bloom at night or in low light, absorb ultraviolet light, which is invisible to human eyes, and re-emit it as visible light in the blue or violet range. To pollinators like moths and certain bees, which can see into the ultraviolet, these flowers appear to glow. They are luminous in a darkness we cannot perceive. The night-blooming flowers of the mangrove forest, the white blossoms of the Sonneratia, the small pale flowers of the nipa palm, the delicate blooms of the sea hibiscus, are all adapted to attract nighttime visitors. They are pale enough to be visible in low light, and many of them are heavily fragrant after dark, releasing scent compounds into the still night air that drift for surprising distances, finding the antennae of moths and the noses of bats and the searching faces of all the creatures that move through the dark looking for sweetness. The nipa palm is a remarkable plant. Unlike most palms, it has no trunk. It grows as a cluster of enormous feathery fronds that rise directly from a horizontal stem buried in the mud, and it spreads by sending out new stems along the ground, rather than growing upward. A nipa grove can cover hectares of tidal land, a vast low carpet of waving fronds, its fruits clustered in round, spiky balls at the base. The nipa is one of the oldest plant species in the world. Fossil nipa pollen has been found in rock strata more than 70 million years old, from before the extinction of the dinosaurs. This means that the nipa palm was here before the mangroves, before the fireflies, before almost everything else that lives in this ecosystem today. It watched in its plant way as the world changed around it, as the climate shifted and the seas rose and fell and rose again, as the dinosaurs disappeared and the mammals spread and the human beings eventually appeared and built their small boats and began navigating the rivers at night. The Nipa is patient in the way that only very old things can be patient. It does not rush. It does not compete for height. It simply spreads outward, quietly, along the mud, one new frond at a time, in all directions, for as long as conditions allow. You, too, can spread outward into your rest tonight, gently, unhurriedly, in all directions. Your breath can spread into the pillow, into the mattress, into the dark and quiet air of the room. You can take up exactly as much space as you need and be exactly as heavy as you are, and rest in the knowledge that you have been here a long time, and the world is glad of it. The synchronization of the mangrove fireflies has been studied not only by biologists, but by mathematicians, people who study patterns and systems and the behavior of large groups of interacting things. The firefly problem, as it is sometimes called, turns out to be a beautiful example of what mathematicians call coupled oscillators, a system in which many individual rhythmic elements influence each other until they fall into synchrony. The mathematics of coupled oscillators appears in many places that have nothing to do with insects. The pendulum clocks on a wall, if they are mounted on the same wooden board, will gradually synchronize their swings through tiny vibrations in the wood. The cells of a beating heart synchronize their electrical pulses through chemical signals, producing the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. Neurons in the brain synchronize in patterns that correspond to different states of consciousness, including sleep. The math that describes the fireflies also, in its way, describes your sleeping brain. When you fall asleep, your brain waves slow. In the early stages of sleep, the rapid, complex patterns of waking thought give way to larger, slower waves, as if millions of neurons, which were all busy with their own individual concerns during the day, begin to synchronize into broader, more restful rhythms. Deep sleep is characterized by slow waves that move through the brain like slow tides, large, rolling, unhurried. And in REM sleep, the brain returns to faster activity, but of a different kind, loose and associative, the waves of dreaming. The fireflies are, in a way, modeling what your brain is doing right now, as you listen and drift toward sleep. The scattered individual lights of a pre-synchrony colony, each one flashing at its own pace, chaotic and busy, are like the thoughts of a waking mind, each one separate and insistent. And the slow, unified pulse of the synchronized colony, 1, 2, 1, 2, is like the broad, rolling wave of a resting brain, all the parts settling into one gentle rhythm. Let your thoughts synchronize now, not by forcing them, just by letting them go, one by one, until there is only the rhythm underneath, the slow, golden pulse of the trees. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. The river is very still tonight. The air above the trees is perfectly clear, and the stars, where the canopy opens, are bright and numerous and cold and far away. They do not blink the way the fireflies blink. They simply shine, steady and continuous, as they have been shining for longer than any living thing on earth can imagine. The fireflies below them blink their brief, bright lives into the same sky. Each thing has its own kind of permanence. If the idea of returning to this playlist on your next restless night feels comforting, please save it somewhere you can find it. It will be here, and so will the river and the trees and the patient, golden light. The mangrove crab, called the mud crab in most of Southeast Asia and known scientifically as Scylla serrata, is the largest crab in the mangrove forest. It can grow to the size of a dinner plate, with claws powerful enough to crack open hard-shelled mollusks with ease. It lives in burrows dug deep into the mangrove mud, and it moves at night, foraging along the root tangles and mud flats for whatever it can find. Snails, small fish, fallen fruit, the remains of other creatures. The mud crab's shell is dark greenish brown, perfectly matching the color of the mangrove mud, and at rest in its burrow it is virtually invisible. Its eyes are on stalks, like the mudskippers, and they swivel independently, giving the crab a nearly full circle of vision around its body. When disturbed, the mud crab moves with surprising speed, not the slow sideways shuffle you might imagine, but a quick, purposeful scuttle that covers a lot of ground in a very short time. But at rest, and especially in the deep of night, the mud crab is very still. It pulls its large body into its burrow and tucks its claws close, and it waits out the hours of darkness in a state of low activity, conserving energy, digesting whatever it ate earlier in the evening, letting the tide rise and fall above it without concern. The burrow is warm and dark and tight, and the crab fits it perfectly. And there is no more secure place in the mangrove world than a mud crab in its burrow at 3 a.m. The mangrove forest provides shelter like this for hundreds of species, not just the large and obvious ones, but the small and overlooked. The mangrove tree crab, smaller than your thumbnail, lives among the upper branches and feeds on leaves. The mangrove fiddler crab, whose male has one enormously enlarged claw that it waves like a conductor's baton, builds its burrow precisely in the intertidal zone so that the tide floods it at exactly the right depth. The porcelain crab filters plankton from the water by spreading its feathery mouthparts like a small net. All of them find their particular niche, their particular depth and temperature and position in the forest, and they hold to it with the tenacity of creatures who know exactly where they belong. There is something restful in the idea of knowing exactly where you belong, of having your niche, of fitting precisely into the space that is yours. You have a space like that, a particular shape you make in the world, a particular weight and warmth. And tonight, in whatever position you have settled into, you fit into it exactly. The hollow of the pillow, the curve of the blanket, the particular geometry of your resting body, all of it is yours. All of it is right. All of it is exactly the right size. The firefly's predators have, over millions of years, created a pressure that has shaped the firefly's behavior in interesting ways. One adaptation is the timing of the flash itself. Most fireflies flash their brightest during the period just after dusk and just before dawn, when there is enough ambient light for the flashes to be visible, but not so much darkness that the firefly is easily visible to a hunting bat. In the deep middle of the night, many firefly species reduce their flashing activity slightly, a compromise between the need to find a mate and the need to avoid being found by something with teeth. The bats that hunt in the mangroves are not, in general, pursuing fireflies specifically. They are after moths, mostly. Large, soft-bodied moths that emerge from the forest at night and fly toward any available light source. The bats use echolocation to find and track their prey, emitting bursts of ultrasonic sound and listening for the echoes that bounce back from a moth's wings. The process is extremely fast. A hunting bat can detect, track, and catch a moth in under a second, adjusting its flight path dozens of times per second in response to the returning echoes. What the bat hears is not a picture. It is something more like a texture, a pattern of information that tells it the size, shape, distance, and movement of everything in the air around it. The world of the echolocating bat is a world of sound shapes, constantly updating, enormously detailed, a kind of three-dimensional map written in ultrasound and refreshed many times per second. It is so different from the way we perceive the world that it is almost impossible to imagine from the inside. But it is no less rich for its strangeness. The moths have evolved countermeasures. Many moth species can hear the bat's ultrasonic clicks, and when they detect them, they take evasive action, folding their wings and dropping suddenly, or spiraling upward, or flying in erratic patterns that are hard to track. Some moths have evolved the ability to produce their own ultrasonic clicks, which appear to jam the bat's echolocation, giving the moth time to escape. It is an arms race conducted entirely in frequencies of sound that no human ear can hear, invisible and inaudible, playing out in the dark air above the firefly trees. And through all of this, the bats and the moths and their invisible war in the upper air, the fireflies continue their patient blinking in the branches below. They are below the bat's usual hunting altitude. They are lit up and easy to see, which sounds like a disadvantage, but their light signals to predators that they taste bad. They contain chemicals called lucibufagins, bitter and unpleasant, which make most predators spit them out after a single encounter. The light is, in a way, their armor. It says, "I am here and I am not worth the trouble." What a thing, to make yourself visible as a form of protection, to shine so clearly and so honestly that there is nothing for anyone to fear from you, and nothing for you to fear from being seen. In the folklore of the Iban people of Borneo, one of the many indigenous cultures of Southeast Asia, who have lived alongside the mangrove forests for thousands of years, fireflies are sometimes associated with the spirits of the ancestors. The small lights drifting through the forest at night are, in some stories, the souls of those who have passed, coming back to visit the world they once inhabited. They come gently, without alarming anyone, and they leave again before morning, without having caused any disturbance. They are not frightening in these stories. They are comforting, evidence that the boundary between the living and the dead is permeable, and that those we love do not go entirely away. Whether or not you hold any such belief, there is something in the image that carries a kind of emotional truth. The idea that love is persistent, that it leaves small lights in the world even after the one who loved has gone. The firefly in this telling is not just a beetle, it is a message. It is the universe saying something was here and it mattered, and it left its warmth behind. The mangrove forests themselves are messengers of a similar kind. They hold, in their roots and their mud and their layers of accumulated organic material, a record of thousands of years of life, pollen from ancient flowers, shells of creatures that lived in the water before anyone now alive was born, the compressed remains of leaves that fell in centuries when no one was counting. If you could read this record, and scientists with careful instruments increasingly can, it would tell you the story of the climate, the rainfall, the tides, the slow changes of the coast over time. The mangrove is an archive. Everything that has ever lived in it has left something behind. A shell, a pollen grain, a layer of organic carbon pressed into the mud. Nothing is entirely lost. A small wind is moving through the mangrove tonight. Barely a wind, more of a breath. The forest exhaling warmth into the slightly cooler air above the water. The highest fronds of the nipa palms are moving very slightly, back and forth. A slow pendulum motion that seems almost meditative. The firefly trees are still lit, their light steady despite the breeze, the synchrony holding. Your own breathing has slowed to something very near sleep. You can feel it, that edge between waking and dreaming, that soft blurring of the boundary where the story you have been following begins to mix with images of your own. That is exactly right. That is the place. Let yourself move into it. The story will hold you here until you are ready to go further. The water at the base of the mangrove trees is not still, though it may look it. It is constantly filtering, moving through the root tangles, carrying nutrients and sediment and tiny organisms, being absorbed by the roots of the trees, being processed by the bacteria and fungi in the mud, being exhaled again as the tide turns and carries it back out toward the sea. The mangrove forest is, in a hydrological sense, a giant living filter, processing enormous quantities of water every day and returning it cleaner than it arrived. The bacteria in the mangrove mud are among the most numerous and diverse organisms in the ecosystem. In a single teaspoon of mangrove sediment, there are more bacteria than there are human beings on the entire earth. Most of them are doing one of two things: breaking down organic material, releasing its stored energy and nutrients back into the water, or producing chemical compounds that other organisms, fungi, plants, small invertebrates, depend on for their own nutrition. The whole food web of the mangrove begins, in a sense, with these invisible multitudes in the mud. The firefly larva moving through this mud is embedded in this web. It eats the snails that eat the algae that feed on the nutrients that the bacteria release. When the larva is itself eaten by a fish or a crab or a bird that has not gotten the message about the bitter taste, it returns its own stored energy to the web. Everything in the mangrove is part of the same enormous circulation, the same slow, patient exchange of matter and energy that has been running uninterrupted since the first living thing colonized the warm, shallow waters of the ancient earth. The firefly's light is part of this circulation in its way. The energy that becomes a flash of bioluminescence came originally from the sun. It traveled as light to the mangrove leaves, was captured by photosynthesis and stored in the plant's tissues, was eaten by a snail, was drunk by a larva, was transformed through the larva's own chemistry into the adult firefly's body, and now lights up the air above the river in a flash of pale gold. Solar energy, transformed beyond recognition, shining briefly in the mangrove night and then gone, but not lost. Energy is never lost. It changes form. It moves. The heat that leaves your body as you rest is warming the air around you slightly. The carbon you breathe out will eventually become part of a plant. The electrical activity in your brain, the soft oscillations of your sleeping mind, are a form of energy moving through matter in a pattern that is entirely and specifically you. You are part of the circulation. You are not outside the world looking in. You are in it and of it, warm and breathing and real. As the night deepens, the mangrove forest makes sounds that you can only hear if you are very quiet and very still. There is the periodic drip of condensation from the high leaves, a single drop falling a long way and hitting the water with a clean, precise note. There is the occasional soft grunt of a frog in the undergrowth, not a sustained chorus, just an individual voice, briefly, and then silence again. There is, every so often, the distant call of a nightjar, a long, churring sound, half mechanical, half natural, that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The nightjar is one of the most remarkable birds of the tropical night. It is completely nocturnal, and its plumage is a masterpiece of camouflage, intricate brown and gray and black patterning that makes it invisible against bark or fallen leaves when it roosts during the day. It has a very wide mouth, fringed with stiff bristles, and it flies through the night air with its mouth open, catching insects in flight. It is a creature of pure darkness, perfectly designed for the hours between dusk and dawn. The nightjar's churring call is one of those sounds that seems to belong to the night itself, as if the darkness has a voice, and this is it. It is not alarming. It is simply the sound of the forest being awake in its own way, on its own schedule, attended to by its own particular inhabitants. There are also, if you listen carefully, small sounds in the water. The surface tension breaks occasionally. A fish rising to take a surface insect, a small crab stepping off a root, the fall of a leaf, or a piece of bark from above. These sounds are brief and soft and irregular, and they give the water a kind of life, not the smooth, glassy silence you might imagine, but a slightly textured, gently punctuated quiet that is more like breathing than stillness. And above it all, always, rhythmically, without interruption, the fireflies. 1, 2, 1, 2. The steadiest sound in the forest, except that it is not a sound at all, but a light. The most reliable rhythm in the night. By now, wherever you are, your body has done most of the work of settling. The muscles have softened. The mind has loosened its grip on the day. Let the thoughts run downstream. Let the mangrove receive them and filter them and return them as something simpler and cleaner. This is what rest does. This is what the night is for. If you feel moved to leave a small comment telling us what you dreamed or what part of the journey stayed with you, the larva in the dark water, the fruit falling into the river, the nightjar's voice, please do. Those words are always welcome here. The firefly colony along the river is at its most beautiful in the hour before the first suggestion of dawn. The night has reached its fullest depth, and the sky above the gap in the canopy is a dark, saturated blue, and every star that can be seen is very bright and very still. The firefly trees along the bank are a long ribbon of slow gold, reflected in the water, so that you cannot quite tell where the real light ends and the reflected light begins. The boundary between the tree and the river is a kind of mirror, above and below, equally lit, equally soft. In this hour, something changes in the quality of the synchronization. The flashes slow very slightly. a barely perceptible lengthening of the interval between pulses, as if the colony is exhaling more deeply, settling further into the night. The individual fireflies are tiring. Some are no longer flying. They have found their resting positions on leaves and bark and are flashing from stillness, anchored, continuing their signal from wherever they have come to rest. The air above the trees, which was full of curving flight paths in the earlier hours of the night, is now quieter. A few late-moving males still tracing their arcs, but most of the activity has resolved into rest. The mating for many pairs has already occurred. The females have retreated deep into the foliage, where they will eventually lay their eggs, small, round, glowing objects deposited in the moist soil near the base of the trees. Even the eggs of many firefly species are bioluminescent, producing a faint, steady light for the weeks before they hatch. The forest floor around a firefly colony is, in a very literal sense, lit from within, not just from above, by the blinking trees, but from below, by the quiet glow of eggs in the dark soil. A new generation, glowing before it has even begun. The cycle is so complete, so self-contained, so beautifully closed upon itself, from egg to larva to pupa to adult and back to egg, each stage lit by its own particular light, that it is hard not to feel a kind of reverence for it. Not a religious reverence necessarily, but a quieter one. The kind that comes from looking at something very old and very well made and recognizing that it has been working without interruption for longer than you can fully imagine. The mangrove apple tree above the glowing eggs has been dropping its fruits into the river all season. Some of them have traveled far by now, downstream to the estuary, and from there into the coastal current, spinning slowly on the warm surface of the Gulf. Each one carries inside it the seed of another tree, patient and viable, waiting for the right mud and the right tide. Some will find it. Some will not. The ones that do will grow slowly into trees of their own, trees that will one day, if the world is kind, hold fireflies in their upper branches on warm October nights. The river receives all of it, the fruit, the seed, the leaf, the reflected light. It carries them all toward the sea, and the sea keeps them. And slowly, eventually, the clouds carry some of the water back inland as rain, and the rain falls on the forest, and the river fills again, and the whole slow circle turns. There is a moment just before dawn when the darkness is not quite dark anymore, but is not yet light, a kind of pre-light, a loosening of the dark rather than an arrival of brightness. In Thailand, this hour is sometimes called the hour of the water buffalo, the time when farmers would traditionally rise to begin their work in the gray between night and morning, before the heat of the day settled in. It is the coolest and the quietest part of the full cycle of the day. In the mangrove, this pre-dawn time brings its own transitions. The nightjars fall silent. The bats return to their roost trees, folding their wings around themselves, becoming small, dark shapes tucked under branches or inside hollowed trunks. The frogs, which have been calling sporadically through the night, give one final series of calls and then stop, as if responding to a signal that only they can hear. And the fireflies, slowly, very slowly, begin to go out. It is not abrupt. There is no moment when the light simply stops. Instead, the intervals between flashes grow longer. Individual fireflies begin to delay their pulses, or skip them altogether, resting between flashes. The synchrony begins to dissolve, not chaotically, but gradually. The way ice dissolves in warm water, the structure softening and spreading, and eventually becoming indistinguishable from the surrounding dark. By the time the sky above the canopy begins to show the first faint distinction between blue and black, the trees along the river are nearly quiet. A few late individuals are still blinking, faint and occasional. But the great coordinated light show of the night has ended. The fireflies do not disappear. They are still there, perched on leaves, tucked under bark, resting on stems in the shade of the broadest leaves, where the coming sun will not reach them easily. They are small and dark and unremarkable in the daylight, indistinguishable from any other small beetle at rest. But they are there. They will be there all day, in their daylight patience, waiting for the particular quality of darkness that calls them out again. The mangrove forest looks different in the morning. The mud flats are revealed by the retreating tide, silver gray and finely ridged. The light that comes through the canopy is green and gold and broken into shifting pieces by the moving leaves. The birds are beginning. The blue flycatcher's soft morning song, the distant hammer of a woodpecker, the clear whistle of a sunbird somewhere in the upper canopy. The world is resuming itself, putting on its daytime face. But the night was real, the light was real, and it is still there, in a sense, stored in the mud, in the eggs, in the resting bodies of the fireflies, in the memory of the water, which carries everything. Let the morning come gently whenever it comes for you. Let the night have been what it was, full of quiet, full of small lights, full of the patient, beautiful business of living things going about their ancient work. You have traveled far tonight and rested well, and the river has carried you here, to this quiet shore. Before we rest entirely, let us stay a little longer, just a little longer, in the soft gray of the pre-dawn mangrove, because there is one more thing to notice, and it is small enough that it is easy to miss. On the broad, waxy leaves of the mangrove trees, where the humidity of the night has left a film of moisture, there are tiny water droplets. Not dew exactly, because dew forms when surfaces cool below the dew point, and the mangrove leaves are too warm for that. These droplets form because the leaves themselves release water through their pores at night, a process called guttation, and this water collects in small beads at the leaf edges and tips, catching whatever light is available and holding it. In the first gray of morning, before the sun has risen, but when the sky is light enough to read by, these droplets catch the ambient glow and become small, precise spheres of reflected light, each one a tiny lens, round and perfect, holding inside it a miniature image of the sky, the water, the tree. If you were small enough to stand inside one, you would see the whole forest reflected, curved and luminous, in the interior of a water drop. This is what the mangrove does at night, in addition to everything else. It makes these small, perfect mirrors on every available surface, and in them the world sees itself, reduced and rounded and still. The firefly larva, somewhere in the mud below, is resting now. It has eaten, and it is still, coiled slightly in the warmth of the deep soil, its faint bioluminescence barely visible in the darkness around it. It is in no hurry. It has months to spend in this form before its transformation. Months of slow, patient growth in the dark water, eating snails glowing softly, living entirely in the present moment. The adult fireflies are resting too, all along the branches, all along the bark, small dark shapes, with their lanterns temporarily dark, their chemistry paused, their wings folded. They are not gone. They are only quiet. And the river moves beneath them, carrying water from the hills inland all the way to the sea. And the sea breathes with its enormous, slow respiration. And the moon, somewhere above the cloud layer now, unseen, is still pulling at the water, guiding the tides, keeping the whole system in its ancient rhythm. You have traveled a long way tonight, through the dark water and the mangrove roots, through the chemistry of cold light and the mathematics of synchrony, through the folklore of ancestor lights and the patience of the waiting heron. You have floated past the glowing trees and listened to the river and breathed the salt and leaf smell of the tropical night. You have been very still, and the world has moved around you, and it has been enough. It has been more than enough. Close your eyes fully now, if they are not already closed. Let the water droplets on the leaves hold their small reflections of the sky. Let the firefly eggs glow in their quiet soil. Let the mud crab rest in its burrow, and the nightjar sleep in its bark-colored silence, and the river carry its dark, patient water toward the sea. Let the trees keep their light for another night. They will be there. The river will be there. And you will be rested. And the morning will be there too, clear and warm and full of the small, particular beauty of a world that has been carefully, continuously, lovingly made. Sleep now. You are safe. You are warm. You are held. The mangroves are glowing somewhere tonight, even as you dream, steady and golden and perfectly synchronized, one long pulse of light along a quiet river in the warm, patient dark of the world. Thank you for spending this night with the Sleepy Nature Channel. If this journey brought you peace, a like or a kind comment means so much. And our playlist of nature sleep stories is always there when the night is long. Rest well, and we will see you in the next quiet place.